Good morning, peeps. Today we're going on our eternal journey of reaching zero waste. The completely waste neutral business that I dream of. And I'm sure, like me, you just have so many pieces, so many offcuts, so many, just so much, so many things. And what we're going to do today is just rework all of this into a cute tote bag that I like to give to my clients when they pick up their stuff. So the first thing we're going to do is select the fabrics we're working on. Now we cannot use anything that has stretch, even though I'd love to use this very sparkly, very fash thing. Stretch we can't use, so that we're going to put to the side. Anything that's too thin, so a lining, we can't use, and something like this lace we cannot use. Also, anything that's too thick. So if we're going to use this jean, this bottom of the jean that we shortened, we cannot use this portion of the hem or this part of the seam. So this will have to cut out. That's fine. Any garment that's full like this, we're either going to unpick or cut. And of course, time is also a resource we don't like to waste. So we will be cutting, but this lining we cannot use. Same with this, we're going to cut out, but these portions we can't use. This is just going to be way too thick. So that is step number one, is to select the fabrics that we're going to work on. And step number two is going to be to iron them. I throw them in this box and they become very crinkly like this. So number one, select the fabrics. Number two, iron. And then we're going to start getting our shape together. Right, so as we go, we're going to find some very interesting things. Try to think about the final garment, or not the final garment, the final product. We don't want these loose stitches on a final product. So things like this, just going to pull out. Then I also found a collar that had some fusing on it. Here's the fusing, there's the collar. Again, think about the final product. Do I want this fusing to, over time, now start to peel off, etc.? No, I don't want that. So I ironed it, peeled the fusing off so I can use this piece. Now also, as we're working, we want pieces that are kind of easy to work with. So if we look at this, this little edge here, nobody needs that. I'm going to cut off this edge. And you'll see we've got this bag here where we're just going to make that a little bit smaller and throw it in there. Also, these loose pieces of thread we're going to throw in there. So this we're going to use for stuffing as we go. We use it usually for tailoring forms, like this kind of vibe. We use it for that. And scatter cushions, things like this. Depending on what we're using for a scatter cushion, we'll mix it half with some actual stuffing that we buy commercially. For these forms, we just keep it exactly like this because it's nice and tough. So that's basically what I'm gonna do now. I'm gonna go around making my shape a bit easier to work with and just making that a little bit smaller, putting it in the bag there. And you will, as you are going, find a lot of these smaller things. Obviously, we cannot really use this to make the tote bag with. So these kind of things, we just want to, in a way, chew them up so that they become nice and small pieces. And this will just be using as stuffing. So that's easy. A piece like this, I really don't feel it's worth it to iron and incorporate it in the tote bag. So I'm just going to chew it up, put it in the bag, and that will be used for stuffing. And then, as we were saying, pieces like this, I'm not going to unpick that. I'm going to cut it. And I quite enjoy this process because I will never cut like that in my life. So it's quite a fun thing to just kind of, live like a savage. Just don't even care about nothing. Just cut like a madman. It's quite fun, seeing what it's like to just be crazy and very fun. And here again, this lining, if it's well fused, I can just leave it. This seam, I'm not gonna worry about unpicking or anything like that. I'm just gonna cut it straight out. Gone with your seam, and these extra pieces are just going to be chewed up into the fusing, into the stuffing. Okay, so I'm just going to continue that, and you'll see we've got a shape here, a pattern piece. So really what we want to do is just place these fabric pieces on this pattern piece to get this shape. Of course, because of the nature of what we're doing, it's not actually going to have a perfect shape to begin with. So make sure that when you place this, you place it a little bit over the edges so that once we've joined everything, we're going to trim it down. This fusing as well, I'll be chewing that up and putting it in the bag full of stuffing. Again, here, I'm just going to lose that piece, this piece. So I'm just going to carry on doing that, placing this all around, and we're going to go from there. So I'm just continuing doing all of that. And just as you go, make sure things are flat. See here, there was a gather stitch. I'm not going to unpick that. Like I say, time is also a resource. And if we're going to be zero waste, we also do not want to waste time. So I'm just going to cut that. And use that piece. Of course, I'm going to chew this up into my stuffing bag. So there's really nothing to it. The things that I can really say is keep it flat, work on the flat, make sure you iron the things that, oh, look how well that fits in there. Iron the things that you're working on, and just make sure that everything is covering all of the corners. Now, here on the edges, there's going to be some seams there, so I don't want to put something thick on the edge. I'll rather put it somewhere in the middle. I don't really stress about too many overlaps or anything like that. This is all just part of the fashion. Of course, if you wanted to be all nice and snazzy and have a design there, that's totally fine. But again, think about the time. At the end of the day, the faster we do this, the faster we can use up these scraps and also get to more exciting projects. Okay, so these jeans I'm actually not going to use right now. I'm going to just put them back in the stash. When you come across things that we can't use in this sort of project, so let's say, for example, I don't know where it is now, but the lining that I cut out of this, the lining that I cut out of that, I can't really use that. I do want to use these buttons, so I'm going to save the buttons, cut off this piece of lining, and then the lining I'm going to put, you'll see here, there's a separate bag for that. Things that we really cannot reuse in this method. This piece of lace, not really useful. So if it's small like this, it just gets chewed straight into the stuffing bag. Pieces of lining like this that are big enough. Here, we're just going to keep this together with the lining. There's another project that we're working on with this. Small pieces like this, chew immediately. Stretch pieces we can't use, that goes with the box of we can't use this for a tote bag. It's just going back in my usual bag. All right, so I'm just going to grab those buttons, chew up the rest of that. And now what we're going to do with this, you see now it's covering my entire pattern. and I'm going to go on the edge and zigzag. Of course, before I do that, I'm going to pin everything. So let me actually put this aside. I'll do that in a moment. But the pinning is the most important. 100%, hala pasala has to be done project, and you have to pin on the flat. If you move this and then think you're going to pin it flat, you are just drunk on the job. So we're going to just go around pinning wherever we want. There's no real rules to this. This is quite a challenging project because of the two layers, or how can I say, because as soon as we lift this, there's also going to be some more flapping around here. So we're going to have to pin it twice. So you're going to need quite a couple of pins here. Just prepare yourself emotionally for that, and don't be shy with the pins. I think I'm going to carry on with that, and I'll catch you in a second when I flip this over to pin the other side. Okay, nothing too exciting, just pins, 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 pins. I'm going to flip this over as delicately as possible. And you see, like this portion, this is just a bit of a challenge. But I'm sure nothing that is going to really break the brains. All we need to do is go again, put some pins. And just be cautious when we sew, knowing that there's pins on both sides. And that we just need to be aware of that. And not sew over the pins, but just take them out as we're going along. So I'm going to continue pinning that, and then I'll head straight to the sewing machine. What we're going to do is do a zigzag over this edge so that we encase any of this frame, and then we'll do a zigzag right next door to that. What I've found is that zigzagging just over the edge is great, but certain fabrics tend to pull out of the stitch line a little bit over time. So it's better we give them another, in a way, securing stitch just next door to where we did the actual stitch. So we're going to have 2 stitch lines around every single piece that we've placed here, and that is going to give us a nice, secure and rather interesting style when the 2 sides come together. So one last thing I can say is that I use this opportunity to use up any thread that I don't really use a lot, or bobbins that are very, at the end of the bobbin that I wound at the end of that color. I'll just go through and use whatever bobbins I see need to be used. I don't really stress to wind a whole new bobbin or use a whole new color. I'm just going to try and use up the colors that are almost done. May as well use this opportunity to finish them off. I'll stitch one side and then we'll be back. Okay, I've just been sewing and sewing, and you can see I'm doing a double line, and I kind of just go wherever the seams take me. And you will see as you go, as I was sewing, this portion just kind of opened up. Obviously, there's not a lot of overlap there, or maybe not sufficient overlap. So I just avoided that piece, no big deal. And I kind of just go willy-nilly. Wherever the seam takes me, I'm now actually going to flip over, carry on stitching on this side, on these ones. I'll flip over again, see where I've missed it on the other side. I'm not too precious about sequence or anything like that. At the end of the day, what we need, and you can see it here very easily from the back side, is these 2 rows so that we're closing that edge. It's not going to fray anymore, and then also giving it some security. And use your discretion. This one, very, very soft because it's quite a synthetic fiber, so very smooth. So easy to pull out. So here on this one, I'm going to do 3. But the rest is going to be 2. And, whenever I take a break like this, just to assess my work or fix a hole or something like that, I'm just going to give it an iron. Because you see, as we're stitching, it creates a bit of a bubble. So I'm just going to give that a very quick iron, making sure not to scratch my iron on the pins. And then I'm going to continue, and I'm going to continue on this side. because why not? All right, catch something exciting. You'll see here somewhere I ran out of bobbin and I just took the very next bobbin that I felt I should use. You know, I look for bobbins that are poorly wound, bobbins that are almost done, colors that I don't use a lot, whatever. You know, there's no real logic there. And I'm just continuing to close my edges, find all the loose spots. And, you know, once I did a little bit of that, again, taking a bit of a break, coming here and seeing how is everything going. And just, you know, taking note, okay, there's still some openings there. There was one up here I saw. So I'm going to give it a quick iron and then back to the machine, closing up all the parts that I've missed. But you see, even though it's a whole bunch of different fabrics, the bubbling isn't too extreme. There will always be bubbling, but break every now and then, give it a bit of an iron, and the pinning and working on the flat. Very, very important. All of that stitching has been done. Now what I'm going to do, I just gave an iron both sides, keeping it flat as possible. I'm going to go around and just trim off all of these small little frays as much as I can, just to get this as neat as possible. I'm not going to let you stick around for that. Obviously, I'm just going to do that. But the next step after that will be to cut out my pattern. So keeping this as flat as possible, putting some weight on here, or in my case, pinning this through. Just make sure I get that little corner there. And I'm then just going to mark this out. Usually you have to do a bit of a combination between chalk and pen here because of the color differences. Let's see. So yeah, you know, I'm just going to mark that out. There's really nothing too exciting here. Just marking that out, and then I'll cut it to the shape of my pattern here. Now you'll see on this pattern here at the top and the bottom, so this is going to fold up. So this is these are the tops, these two edges. There's drawn there a line that's 1.5 centimeters wide, and it's written there, turn 1.5 plus 1.5, meaning that is our top seam. We're going to turn 1.5, 1.5. So I'm going to do all of that, and then we will continue from there. I'm going to go iron that in a second. The next thing we're going to do is look at getting these straps done. And again, you'll see it's written here on this pattern piece. Here's the strap here. It's 44 centimeters long by 6 centimeters wide. This is the pattern piece we're cutting out. And does say here 0.5 centimeters seam allowance. So all I'm going to do is get a piece of fabric. And now here, because it's a strap, so handvatsel, we don't want to use, again, anything that's stretch, and we want to be straight on the grain line. We don't want to be on the bias, because for a handle, that's not going to be a smart move. So I am going to cut out these two straps. I'm just going to measure there 6 centimeters and 6 centimeters. Make sure this is nice and straight. And what do I want here? 44. 44. Oh, look at that excellent perfection of fitting. So, right, I'm going to cut that out, and then I'll be stitching it. You know, once I've cut that, I'll just fold it over and stitch that 0.5 centimeter seam allowance. Let's pop to the iron quickly. Nothing too exciting. It's just turning 1.5, 1.5. Thought maybe let's just show you how I'm going to go about that. I'm going to give my 1.5 there. Now here, we've got a whole bunch of different fabrics, a whole bunch of different grain lines. So it can end up warping a little bit. So I'm just going to make sure I give this a really nice good iron, so that it's just going to give me a nice crisp edge. And obviously I'm going to do that twice. Another strategy that we can do maths to our advantage. So here I want to flip 1.5 times 2 is 3. So I can just measure from the edge. There's 3. I can just put a few marks here and there where I want, or where is my 3. And then you see this was too warm from the iron, so it just disappeared immediately. And then I can iron up to that mark. Obviously the chalk won't disappear with the heat. So you see what's happening there, just ironing up to that mark. And of course, because that is 3 and I've now divided it by 2, it's going to give me 1.5. So those are the two strategies I like to use. And of course, ironing this before we stitch is non-negotiable. We're not just going to fold that and stitch it and then imagine that the iron is going to sort out our nice crisp edge. I'm going to put some pins here because I'm a pinner. Do the other side, and then I'm just going to stitch. I'm going to stitch a straight stitch, just nice and close to the edge, nice and neat. And then from the sewing machine, stitch that at 1.5. Just give that a nice little iron to keep it nice and straight. Now here, I actually recorded this whole thing without pressing record. Let me just double check. Record is on. Here we're going to open up the seam. Bit of a tricky thing to do, but you open up that seam, give that an iron. You can, if you want, put a knitting needle on the bottom here, because that will open without giving you a crease there. Then we're going to use this gizmo, come around, grab a little portion like this, try and get as much as possible. And now we're going to move this back through. You'll see that you don't want to have a bunch up on the end. If we let it bunch, let's say like that, there's a lot of friction here. So it will be very difficult to pull that through. And because that little hook is quite small, it can very easily just rip out of the edge of the fabric. So you've got to go piece by piece like this. Even if I try from here, it's going to bunch up there and create a knot. So go piece by piece. Now that it's through, I'm going to open this up, keeping my seam in the center. And then you'll see on the pattern it's written that we're going to turn the straps 2 centimeters each side. So I'm just going to do that. I like to attach my straps now while the bag is still open. Makes it a bit easier for me. A little graphic on the pattern showing that we have our center point of our bag here. I'm just going to do a pin. So I'm folding that in half, getting my center, there it is. And I want to measure 6 centimeters from the center. My strap is going to come there. So I'm going to use this as my outside. You can use that as the outside. It's not really going to matter. I'm just going to go 6 centimeters from my center to where my strap is. And my strap is going to be 4 centimeters down from the top. So there's my 6. And now I want it 4 centimeters down, 4 down, 6 from the edge. That's where I want my strap to be. And I'm going to do the same this side. I'm going to make sure my strap is not twisted. 6 centimeters from the center, 4 centimeters down. That is where I want my strap to be. So how I'm going to stitch my strap is the following. I'm going to start either at the top or the bottom, doesn't matter, but start on the section where the tension is pulling. So let's say I start here. I'm going to start here, back check a little bit, come around. Then I'm going to do my square. When I come here, I'm going to make sure that I tuck that little edge in. I don't want to see like this nonsense. As you come there, you're going to tuck that in. I'm going to come around, starting there, coming around. Now here, I'm going to go twice. over there, so that here we've got a double, making it nice and strong. Then I'm going to go diagonal, and then again here twice, so that the portions that hold the tension here and here, they have a double. Then I'm going to go back up here and do a small back tack there. So I'm going to pin the other side, pop over to the machine, and do that stitching. Having done my stitching, and you see here there's a double top and bottom, because that's where the strength needs to be. There's no point putting a double side. I suppose there's a little bit of a point, but it would be better top and bottom. And of course, you can always check yourself. How straight are you? Deep questions that we ask here in the studio. Just check those and make sure that the straps are matching up. I don't want to see one strap being a little bit skewed for absolutely no reason. You'll see then also here on this little graphic, we've got a French seam on the sides, and that's going to be 0.5 and then 1 centimeter. So French seam, if you're not aware, is starting with wrong sides together. So here we're going to have, this is what it's going to look like at the end of the day. So this is now obviously my inside, so I'm going to start with insides together, wrong sides together. I'm going to start with a 0.5 centimeter seam. I've now stitched this 0.5 centimeter seam allowance, wrong sides together. Obviously giving that a little bit of an iron. Obviously, if it's not a bag, it's going to be a little bit easier. But start by pushing your seam allowance to one side. This is really going to help you turn a really crisp edge. Now, of course, here down in the corner, not really feasible. So I am going to use the corner of this form to get into the corner there. This is why forms are so very useful and why we make them with all of the offcuts. So having ironed it like that, it's just going to fold here much neater. And of course, I'm going to give it an iron, making sure I'm ironing on the edge. Here, I'll get in there with a knitting needle and just squeeze out that tip a little bit. Fold it over, and then here I'll be stitching as the instructions say at 1 centimeter seam allowance. So there you have your French seam. I'm just going to give that a stitch, and then we're going to be done. I'm going to grab a pin now quickly just so I can kind of show you what's happening there. So now that we've ironed it over like this, now we have right sides together. So now you'll be stitching as usual, right sides together. Now we're doing 1 centimeter seam allowance. So when we flip this around, that will be now my final tote bag. And then on the inside here, you're going to have an encased seam like that. And that'll be that. There's the tote, using up all of